because when we do go live, I want to make sure that we spend the requisite, 3 minutes or so going, are we live?
I think, and I think that's now because we are live.
And it says that we are live now. So I'm going to take that. I'm going to take that as a good news and say, welcome, literally one person or two persons. I'm Austin Tichenor.
I'm Reed Martin, and we are 2/3 of the
Reed is frozen.
Oh.
Or I am, and we are
2/3 of the Reduced Shakespeare Company. You did not freeze.
You, Reed. Is that my internet that's unstable? Or
I hear you both equally now.
Yep.
Matt Croke
anyway,
is talking.
This is going so smoothly. We are 2/3 of the Reduced Shakespeare Company. I can't tell if Austin's hearing us or not.
All right.
You there, Austin?
I'm going to turn off my browser.
I think Austin might not be hearing us because Reed, me and you are coming through. So let's just get through the technical. Hello, Austin.
And I think I still can't hear anything on Zoom or Facebook, but I am on Twitter, I think. So hello, everybody on Twitter, on the Reduced account on Twitter. But I can't hear Matt or Reed somehow.
You can't hear us. We can hear you.
I've closed my browser.
All right.
How about now, Austin? We'll do a phone commercial. Can you hear us now?
It just went away. The sound just went away.
Well, while Austin's figuring that out, hello, the two of you who are watching around the world to our Reduced Shakespeare Company live stream. Austin has been unable to hear us, but we've been able to hear him and each other. So
I can hear you now.
It's a miracle.
It's a miracle. Now it's suddenly, it was apparently my earbuds just decided to die. Reed, have you been a perfect host and greeted everybody?
I did. I welcomed both people who are out there. I think there's one in Aberystwyth, and and somebody out in Fargo, North Dakota.
We love our Welsh friends and our North Dakotans. Here, Twitter is Reed and me on Facebook.
Yes, your background sort of took that. We couldn't see that too well with the background.
And I'll be hanging in the background. I will be monitoring. My job will be monitoring Facebook. So please, if you have any questions for Reed or Austin, put them on Facebook. I will be monitoring Facebook, and I'll be asking the questions for them to answer. This is a Q&A. If we want to jump into it, if you don't mind, I'd like to start with the first question.
What?
You can, and I'm just going to welcome Carlos and anybody else from Shakespeare Argentina who has joined us on Twitter. So that's cool.
Muy bien.
So I want to start with before you guys are writers, you're directors, you're actors. I want to start with the performing aspect of your shows. You've always said that your shows are not about the silly topics. They're about the three characters on stage and the status and how you do it. Your shows are performed in high school, colleges all over the world. And we have seen some of those shows. We've seen them online. And many times we go, oh, shoot, there's a missed opportunity of them not understanding the character. So I want to show you this clip from The Complete History of America, where it's the radio show. We're doing a campfire scene. And if you just read the script, it looks like we're doing silly noises and there's comedy, but the character development and the status is what brings in a lot of the laughter. So I'm going to show this clip, and then if you can comment on what you're seeing, and we'll go from there. So let me share this.
Meanwhile, Dodge Rambler to ruin his faithful horse Horton to the dusty Gulf sky as night falls.
So talk briefly about, as writers and actors, what are we about performing your shows in comedy, what's not being said?
Well, as you said, I mean, first of all, who's that third guy, Austin? There's a some third monkey in there making monkey sounds. For those who didn't pick up, that's Matt Croke, who's hosting us today, who we've known forever and's performed with us forever. Well, yeah, it's, as you said, it's the relationships, right? So all the shows are sketch comedy with the through line. In that particular one, we're telling the history of America, but it's also the relationship between the three guys, right? So I don't know, I have to go back and look at the stage directions as to how much of that is described in terms of our thoughts about what everybody else is doing. Hey, good job, bad job. I don't know. What do you think, Austin?
Well, yeah, everything. I agree with everything you said, and I think we say it in our playwrights for what it's worth notes at the front of each script, and we say it a lot because we see it a lot. The biggest problem the biggest mistake people make when they do our shows is they just go for the jokes when, as you said, it's really a play about three idiots desperately trying to condense something that's uncondensable within 2 hours. And I say this when I'm directing it too, and when we're even talking with our new actors, if each third of the Reduced Shakespeare Company had their way, they would reduce the complete works or all of American history or all the great books, whatever it was, in their own way. And the fighting amongst themselves about the best way to reduce something is what creates all the tension. And of course, there is the comic characteristics of our commedia archetypes, whereas I'm the professore, because I've got the one with glasses and reads the dottore or is that right? The capitano.
I'm the Mo. I'm the
Mo.
Bud Abbott. I'm the
I'm the
tough guy.
I'm the pretentious intellectual, and Matt Croke, right? Matt Croke or Adam Long are the idiot man children, the
Harlequino, if you will, Harpo.
The Harlequino, the wise fools who seem to not get it, but then they suddenly do get it, and it's also just funny. Whereas I think I'm doing something very realistic with my crickets. He comes in with monkeys and goes, "What? I thought we were doing animals," and then you come in with the fundamental best joke, the fart joke.
Exactly. It's classic. Yes. It's not only sounds funny, it smells funny.
What do you guys see from amateur productions of things that people miss, though? For people who are doing your shows, what are things that people are not getting?
Our talent. What talent? Well, it's interesting. Somebody we know is going to do one of the shows next season and asked, well, what do you think about, opening up the cast? Fine. We have no problem with how you cast it. That is not an issue. You want to expand it. You want an all-female cast, however you want to do it. People wonder if that's fine. That's absolutely fine. And I've directed the show like that myself, at least a couple of times in non-RSC productions. I think that there's a few traps. One, read the stage directions. I sound like a broken record if you've heard us before, but I still, Lauren Gunderson was talking about this in her playwriting online class. She said, playwrights, she said if she could, I think she was exaggerating, a choice between cutting the dialogue or cutting the stage directions in her plays, she'd cut the dialogue. So we spend a lot of time, like years before a script is published, working out how bits work. And we're trying to give people who produce it help. So at least read it, then cross it out and don't do it, but at least be aware. The other thing is every joke, you don't want to throw in a whole bunch of new jokes. Please do update it. That's another thing we completely encourage. Stop making the Cato Kalin jokes. But sometimes to get a big laugh, we have cut smaller laughs on the way to a big laugh, and there's a reason for that. Then it works better. There's a rhythm to it. So sometimes people play it funny, and I think if you looked at that section there, we do silly things, but we do them seriously. So act the silly material seriously, and don't add in jokes. What do you think, Austin?
Yes, again, to all of that. And just to echo what you said, not all jokes are created equal. Not all laughs are created equal. So sometimes we'll get this sometimes where somebody will have an idea of, oh, I've got an idea. We can add an extra joke here. Well, that's killing the build to this other bigger moment.
And the other thing I would say is that, and this is true when I direct unreduced Shakespeare as well, is that you must earn your pauses. You just need to go lickety split all the time. So when you stop, the stopping and the pause has meaning. If everything has meaning and weight, then nothing has meaning and weight.
Yeah, there's a musicality to the way we write it and the way it perform it. I think comedians tend to be musicians frequently, because if I don't even have to say the joke, but ba, right? There's a rhythm to it. Da 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 ba, da 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 ba. And so, but if everything's da 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 da, there's no musicality. You lose a lot of the jokes.
Well, yeah, and I just watched on Thursday night the National Theatre Live broadcast of their production of Twelfth Night, which I thought suffered a lot from pause. Too many things are serious. It had other issues that I will be discussing this Thursday with Cincinnati Shakespeare Company. We're going to have a talk back about that production of Twelfth Night, and also their production of Twelfth Night that I directed a few years ago. And also, just to say, I just noticed we have 74 comments already on our Facebook page, and we will definitely
just from you and me. Yeah.
Yes. Rosalind Fitzpatrick says hello from your favorite niece, Reed. I hope I said her name right.
Oh, Roisin. Hey,
Roisin. Hello, Roisin. Let's stick on, and I'm monitoring these comments. Let's stick quickly on the pauses, because when we do see some of the shows, we see people running through lines and not taking pauses and not doing reactions. Let's quickly look at this clip and maybe highlight what the pauses and what reactions, how important they are in the show.
Okay.
Began.
That's true. Ladies and gentlemen, we are indeed fortunate because Matt is part Indian. His great-grandmother was a full-blooded crow
And had a wingspan of 8 feet.
That is so typical of the white man.
full-blooded crow Indian.
Thank
So let's talk about pausing and focus that sometimes gets rushed through when people do your shows.
Yeah, well, it's you by keeping up the tempo until the punchline, then you can write out the laugh and the pause. And to the audience, it doesn't feel like a pause. You're allowing them, you want to allow the audience to have the freedom to laugh, and that you're not going to start talking and force them to stop laughing. Now, some people do say, oh, you go so fast, I missed some of the jokes. And this is absolutely true. We stop for the good ones, right? There's all jokes, all laughs are not created equal. There's a lot of little throwaway jokes that, yes, we might deliver under a laugh, and it's, people get it, they get it. But again, that's what you just saw is we're reacting to each other's lines.
We, John Schwab, one of our RSC UK members, yesterday just posted on Twitter a video of him and Kyle Dadd on Kyle's final performance at the Criterion, and Gary Fannin doing Rap Othello, and they do it so fast.
Oh,
I mean,
I've seen that.
Yeah, it's ridiculously fast.
And the show runs 10 years. Get through it.
Right. And it's a marvel of how fast, but you didn't hear a single line. Yeah, we've tried to. We've noticed that ourselves. We go too fast every now and then, and we'll see videos of it, and we go, we're going too fast, because it's not that they're missing jokes; it's that they're literally missing words.
Well, and this is a fine point, but it's worth making. Fast is not necessarily. I mean, we do tend to talk fast, but really, it will seem slow if you're pausing between lines or not picking up cues.
Yeah.
So you want it to keep flowing. Don't act between the lines. This is old advice, but it's certainly true. Act on the lines. Pick up your cues. So sometimes I'll say, somebody pick up your cue, and then they're talking fast, which you can pick up your cue and talk slower. You can pick up your cue and talk fast, but yeah, don't leave those gaps.
You should always want to be talking, and I'm surprised actors don't do this all the time. You should always want to be saying something to the person. You're not literally waiting for your turn to talk. You should always try to be talking, and that helps your partner actor try to get his point in and change his rhythm too.
Well, because yes, you decided while the other person's talking, you want to say something, right? It's impulse, not cue, right? There's an impulse in the middle of what the other person is saying where you want to talk, and you're not listening to the last half of what they're saying, right? Because you're trying to get into it. So that's another way to pick up your cues.
Reed, you mentioned this earlier. Joy Araco says, good, I directed an all-woman version as my senior directing thesis in undergrad in 2000. You mentioned about the different dynamic. You write it a certain way, but you don't care who performs. Talk about an all-woman version or other versions.
Well, somebody is about to direct one of the shows, and I said, you cast it any way you want, with as many people as you want, that's fine. If it is going to be multiple gendered, I suggested, and I don't know that you and I, Austin, have ever talked about this, but if you're going to have more than one gender in the show, have them play different genders when they're in character, go into, if you have a male and a female, I'd suggest having the male play Juliet and the female play Romeo. I just think there's humor to be had there. Did Austin freeze? Can you hear me?
I think he did freeze. Well, let's unmute him. I think he's
back
back on. He's back.
I can't hear
He's
you.
back. There you go.
There, I'm back. Sorry, did I just go away?
Yes. So I was just saying, yes, if the cast has more than one gender in it, do within when they're playing roles, cross dress them. I think there's humor to be found there.
Yes, you faded out there, so I didn't hear the end of that sentence. Sorry.
Okay. You froze for me too. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, I'm all in favor of all women, multi-genders, all non-binary. There's just, I love it because the more people you get involved, the more jokes there are to make,
Yeah.
And comedy, it can be a great way to include everybody. I mean, I used to love Don Rickles, and I can understand, young people now going, oh my God, he said what? But at the time, he was a great, he made fun of everybody, and you felt included and you felt excluded if he didn't make fun of you. And so I think, sometimes we'll get old people, and I say old people now because I'm getting increasingly closer to their age. But we would make fun of their age or how they, you, of course you love that joke. You loved it when George Washington made it 250 years ago. And they love that. Yes, you're right. I'm old, you can't, but you got to tell the truth. Tell the truth about who you are, where we are, what's going on. And, I think if it's done in a context of love and sharing and inclusivity, that it can be just wonderful.
And Ronan Hatfull wants to know, how does the comedian dynamic shift during performance? Has this changed depending on the topic of reduction?
The comedian, the commedia.
Commedia dynamic shift during performance. How does that?
I don't know that in the middle of a performance it shifts so much. I think we play exaggerated exaggerated versions of some aspect of our personality, but from show to show, it does shift. Although it's a little bit, we're not the Marx Brothers by any means, but it's a little bit like the Marx Brothers. We're in different situations, but we're more or less playing, variations on the character. I think our two most recent shows, maybe that has changed a bit, where we're not, even our most recent show, the Hamlet's Big Adventure, which is a prequel, we never portray ourselves. In all the other shows, there's a framing device where, hey, I'm Reed, I'm Austin, I'm Matt, we're the Reduced Shakespeare Company. We're going to do this show. Then we start the show, then we break out of it. Now in Hamlet's Big Adventure, it's a play. We never have that framing device. And so we're all playing multiple characters, but not necessarily what you're used to. Yeah, Austin.
Yeah, I was just going to say it's less about the dynamic. Well, the dynamic is affected by the status of the actors. And sometimes, like in the Three Stooges, you had Moe and Curly, and every time, Moe and Larry. And when you get a Curly, you got a great threesome. And when you got a Shemp, you didn't get quite such the threesome that you wanted. But in the example you were talking about, Reed, for Hamlet's Big Adventure, Jessica Romero, who I think might be on this conversation, she threatened.
She better be. She said she had 93 questions 5 days ago.
Yeah, so they're better. I'm looking for the 93 questions. Maybe she could just nail them to some wall somewhere. Anyway, Jessica did the workshop where she played both Ophelia and Hamlet's father, the king. And in all the roles I've ever seen Jessica in, she tends to play lower status characters, more clownish characters. So her version of the king was funnier than mine in a certain way, whereas I tend to play high status characters. You know, I tend not to play the fool. I tend to play the smart guy who gets brought down because he's not as smart as he thinks he is. So I think that's an example of how status can affect things. Also, Jessica's Ophelia is way more adorable than mine.
Oh, Austin, you're adored.
Austin.
But this gets back to a couple of things. One, casting is so much of it. The more I direct, you know, because I'm adjunct 4 different community colleges at the moment, I direct all the time. And we know this also from our experience with it. Casting, I don't know, 80% of it, 90% of it. I see directors who say, oh, they don't quite have this, but I think I can, you know, mold them and change them. But in my mind, I go, what I see in the callback, that's what I'm expecting. Now, I know in some cases I'll get more, but as a minimum, I can get that. But if I have to spend weeks and weeks molding somebody, sort of coaching and, you know, getting them into a thing, when I go away, they are themselves. That's gonna be the default. And the other thing is, we write for, just like Shakespeare had a company, right? And he wrote for people. When Austin and I write a show, we say, okay, well, we're writing, you know, this is Austin's part. Oh, Austin plays the ukulele. This is Reed's part. Oh, he eats fire. So we're writing for specific people, and that helps.
So Reed, let's stick with that for a second. If you're saying casting is 80% of it, thinking of your shows in mind, what suggestions or advice do you have then for auditions?
Well, we ask, depending on the show, if it's a Shakespeare show, we ask them to do a Shakespeare monologue, probably comic, but honestly, because we like to do this serious material, the funny material seriously, I don't mind seeing a serious Shakespeare monologue. And then we ask them to tell a joke, and then we talk to them, right? One tells a joke. Austin, I think, said this, or maybe it was on our group chat a couple of weeks ago. The joke tells us what's their sense of humor. Do they know how to tell a joke? Can they get to the punchline and keep moving? Is this a joke? You're taking 2 minutes to get the joke that should be 30 seconds long. And then we chat with them because, and it's more, not so much for people who license the scripts where, you know, you're going to spend, you know, a few months with somebody, but we might be spending years and years with somebody, and they might be great on stage for those 2 hours. But there's 22 other hours in the day where we're going to be on planes and buses and rehearsal rooms and things like this with somebody. And so we want to know what they're like as a person. Theater world is very small.
Tell the truth.
Yeah, we'll ask people, you know, if they've worked with somebody we know, we're going to go back and talk to those people. Hey, we're thinking of hiring so-and-so. What were they like?
Well, and speaking of telling the truth, I just happened to see a question from Patricia Gallagher, who asked, the audience influences the performance as well, doesn't it? I know you don't do a lot of ad lib, but how do you change things up to engage a reticent audience? I think we have different answers to this, but my first answer, to tie it to the previous question, is that you tell the truth. You know, if there's only 10 people in the audience, you know, 500-seat house, you know, you just acknowledge it and know that we're all in this together. The danger is that you get angry that 490 people didn't show up and you take it out on the 10 people who did. No, if anything, the 10 people deserve even better an audience. And what I find sometimes in this example is that they get a better performance because we're all in this together, and the audience and performers, and it becomes clearer on some nights than on other nights. But, you know, if somebody's talking on their phone, we'll always call it. If somebody comes in late, we always call it. If one of us makes a mistake, we call ourselves on it, because sometimes, not always, but sometimes the audience knows it happened. You can't pretend it didn't happen. If you try to pretend it didn't happen without acknowledging it, everybody knows you're lying, and you've missed an opportunity.
And it's the joy of theater, right? It is supposed to be different every night, right? Otherwise, why isn't it a movie? Right? Movie can do it so much better. So what I love about theater is it's interactive, right? We mess up, we call it, we go back, we mock each other. Somebody falls asleep, we'll say, oh, shh. We've done this many times. Somebody's asleep in the front row, and we creep up. Because it's just acknowledge the truth. So yeah, I don't know, a very high percentage of the show is completely scripted, but there's definitely room for improvisation. Again, use it sparingly, pick your spots. But latecomers is certainly one of them. Or somebody leaving in the middle of an act. We'll ask them, sorry, where are you going? Oh, I need to go to the restroom. Okay, we'll wait. We've done that.
One or two.
And we is it a one or a two? And we'll wait several minutes. Or if it's too long, we'll let them go out, and then we'll say to the audience, okay, we're going to keep going, but when they come back in, we're going to stop, everybody stand up and give them a standing ovation, right?
Well, and here's back to your audition question. I mean, it's true for any job. Don't be a dick.
Wait a minute, back up. What?
Sorry, I'll spell it out. Don't be a eggplant emoji. Because people will check on it, but also this is true in any business. I remember one guy auditioned for us, and he did this really misogynist David Mamet monologue, and we went, "Ooh, God, okay, well, let's see what his joke is." And it was a misogynist joke. We went, "All right, well, we're not taking that guy."
Well, thank goodness I got cast anyway, but you know.
Yes, we cast Reed anyway because he has a lot of skills. But yeah, I mean, don't be a dick. Be a good person to work with, and we'll work with you all the time.
I also want to go back a little bit. Paul Bynes wanted to know, were you ever tempted to switch the roles around? Were you guys ever tempted to play other people?
I've never thought about that. I've never been. I mean, there's bits that are funny where I go, I'd love to do that bit. That's a great bit. But actually, I think it's because we write it for ourselves, right? So Austin and I are writing a show. I go, well, what would I like to do in a show? Oh, well, let me write that.
Well, and I always feel like, yes, I could play Reed's part and I could play Matt and Adam's part, but I'd be acting. And when I'm playing my own character, I'm not acting so much as I am portraying an exaggerated version of myself and roles that I'm comfortable doing. I mean, the frustration of being an actor is that you get typed all the time, but you typically get typed for a reason. The problem is they frequently don't write characters that are as more interesting than just their type. You know, I go on to play a doctor or a lawyer, and I'm playing my note in the symphony, but in the piece. But in our shows, all of us are called upon to do so many things, and that's great.
Well, and there have been times during PRs where maybe it's just Austin and me, and there's a two-person scene, but it's written for, the Matt Croke Adam character. And so we'll read that, and it's fine. We know we can make it work. But yeah, you're not relaxed and just yourself, right? And the key is relaxation. That's the key. That's also the key with improvisation, right? That we've written the show. You don't feel necessarily relaxed when you first start to do it, but after a few years, you're relaxed. It's like Anthony Hopkins said, what's your advice on acting? He said, learn your lines backwards and forwards and everybody else's line. And then you can just relax and be present. And that's what improvisation is, relax and be present. So if I'm playing myself, I can relax. If I was playing Austin's part, it wouldn't be me.
Somebody just asked, Kevin Paul Weikart, I hope I pronounced that, Wickart maybe, just asked, have you ever considered condensing Waiting for Godot? We did in the Complete History of Comedy Abridged. We do Waiting for Godot in about 4.5 seconds.
Yeah.
Well, and Austin, let's stick with Kevin because he earlier asked, what's your secret for keeping freshness and energy while you're doing the show for the 93rd time? That also comes from Kevin Paul Wickert.
93rd. Oh, that's early in the run.
It's very specific. Yes, it is very specific.
That's a great question. And it was something I was going to say in response to a previous question about improv, is that, one of the greatest compliments we get is when people come up to us and say, oh my God, how much of that was improvisation? And very little of it is improvisation. In fact, a lot of things they ask, oh, well, that was totally scripted. We go, no, that actually just happened for the first time. We're not improvisers. As my wife, Dee Ryan, the Second City alum, will tell us all the time. We are not improvisers, but our job as actors, and it's true for any actor in any play anywhere, the job of an actor is to make it feel like it's just happening right now for the first time. And that skill is even more important in comedy, I think.
Yeah, well, it's hard not to have a fun time when you've got 200 or 2,000 people there laughing hysterically, right? Mm-hmm. So it's fun. Now, obviously, there are nights where they're not laughing so much. but still, it's a fun job just in general. How do you keep it fresh? I heard there was a Sammy Davis Jr. documentary, and they said, how can you sing "I Gotta Be Me" again and again, and it seems like you're connected to it every night. And I've heard other people say this. I bring what I'm feeling that night to singing it. And so, yes, there's lines and there's blocking, and you have to be faithful. But within that, there's freedom to bring. I think some of my best performances, getting back to Small Houses or whatever, where there's a small house and it's crappy, or nobody's laughing, or somebody's sleeping in the front row, and I'm furious, and I don't care, right? And that's the truth of me that night. Yeah. And I bring that, and it's funny just because people sense it's true.
Yeah, well, you yell at. There's one point where you yell in the radio show at us, and Matt and I are always under our breath going, "Wow, that seemed like an overreaction." I mean, just
that was a little harsh.
Our own inner monologue.
We have a couple questions here that's kind of the same. Davey Naylor, hey Davey, he wants to know best and worst touring venues. He said, I bet I can guess the worst. But then Bud asks, what was the best audience you had in an unexpected place? So can you guys touch on touring, whether cities, best or worst, audiences in a particular part of the world?
That's funny. I don't. I off the top of my head, I'm drawing a blank. And even if I did remember some terrible venues, I'm not sure I would want to say them out loud, because we might get booked back there again, and we always need the.
Davey is referring to the one in Wales on the seaside. That rainstorm.
That was pretty bad.
Yeah, it was like 2,000 or 3,000 seats, and I think we had 40 people, and we'd driven through like a gale force hurricane. Just madness for hours and hours. But that wasn't, so that it wasn't a bad venue. It was a bad experience.
Audiences, any audience demographic from any part of the world stick out to you?
For reasons we still don't completely understand, and this isn't true of all comedy, ours tends to travel. And I think maybe it's because we have all kinds of jokes, smart, intellectual, scatological, smart, stupid, physical, verbal. So fortunately it plays. I will say we're better known in Britain because we ran in the West End for 10 years. I do think it's a cultural thing that American audiences are just louder. Maybe we're ruder. I don't know. We're not as well mannered.
Yeah, there have been definitely theaters we've played, and I can think of a couple examples, but I don't think I'll name them, where we think their audience doesn't get to see something like us very much, and they see either something that's more serious or accepted as great theatrical literature or something, and they have no way to process vaudeville. And that's what we are. We're kind of a very old school. I mean, the New York Times, Stephen Holden in the New York Times called us intellectual vaudeville, and I cherish it. And if I ever had the chance to buy him a drink, I would buy him several. But that seems really right. It's as you were saying, highbrow and lowbrow. And what we always find is sometimes the first act, people are kind of a little wary and not quite sure how they're supposed to respond. And then we go back in during intermission, we go, I hope they come around. And then we come back and the second act's great because they've all talked amongst themselves in the lobby, then gone, oh, did you like it? Oh, I like it too. Okay, good. Okay. And then they feel comfortable in the second act to laugh.
I can think of a lot of venues that I just think of so fondly. Going to the Kennedy Center, we played the Terrace Theater 8 or 10 times. Yeah, I would love to go back. So playing the Kennedy Center, playing the Lincoln Center Serious Fun Festival, of course, the Arts Theater in the West End, times, the Criterion, the Gielgud. Yeah. I remember when we first played American Repertory Theater in Cambridge. We've performed there, I think, 3 times, and thinking, wow, when I was going to theater school, this is a place I just so looked up to, and here I am, right? Seattle Rep. And then traveling, I mean, is a really great benefit. I met my wife traveling. So I have very fond performance. Jane was the artistic director of the Hawkswell Theater in Sligo, Ireland, and booked us, and we got married a year later. I went over there, drank their beer, stole their women. Go ahead.
And Pittsburgh is another city. Pittsburgh, Western Virginia, places we've gone so frequently and for so long, where the audiences it feels like we have a real relationship with the audiences, where they are on board from the first part of the play, and and it's just lovely to have that relationship. I think I mean, every theater's trying to do this, right? It's why we're doing all these things on Zoom now. We're trying to not only maintain the communities we have, but maybe enlarge them in some way, because that's why we go to the theater, to have that sense of community. So it's fun to come back to these different cities, and to maintain that community. And then it's also fun to go to new places and get new ones.
An interesting thought occurred to me while you were saying that, Austin, about memorable audiences. And I think it ties into what the world is going through at the moment. After 9/11, shortly after 9/11, I feel it was just a few weeks, we were booked to do the Complete History of America abridged in Arizona. And Austin and I talking about it and going, well, I just don't know how this is, like, people going to like this? Are they going to be offended? But the venue wanted us. And so we went out and we did it, and people said, and I found that to be, I still remember it here almost 20 years later, people came up to us in the lobby and said, thank you so much. I needed that. It's an irreverent celebration of our country. I needed to laugh, and I needed to be reminded, what makes, about the greatness and foibles of our nation. And so when things return to whatever the new normal is now, I think I'm looking forward to sort of bringing that to people again, I hope.
San Diego, also real fam, and San Diego was during the fire, and we did not cancel the shows during the fire. And I remember same thing, people coming up and saying, I've been living in my car. Thank you for not canceling these shows. And the whole city was on fire.
And when we were at the Gielgud Theater doing the Bible in the summer of '97, on the day that Princess Diana had her memorial service, we were the only show in the West End that didn't cancel the matinee. And we played to like 30 people, but all of whom said the exact same thing. Thank you for doing this. We needed this, because it was a hell of a week.
Now, Karen Chadbourne asked a question I want to expand a little bit. She says, have you ever considered doing the history of politics? Now, I want to expand that about not only where you get your ideas for shows, but it also kind of goes into how you actually perform of being silly or not silly. So why don't you, I guess that's it right there, isn't it? But how do you guys pick your topics for shows?
Good question.
Well, I mean, there's definitely a lot of politics in History of America. I think there's sort of more general, DVD. I think we wouldn't want to do something that's too topical that it won't sustain over time. We don't want to write something that 5 years from now people won't care to see. So I don't know, Austin. I do feel like there is politics in all of our shows, but specific. And I was a poli-sci. I mean, I love politics. I'm addicted. But I feel like for me, it's more interesting to come at it kind of through a side door rather than head on.
Yeah, agreed. I remember every time we were kicking around new shows, I don't say it quite so much anymore, but for a while I thought, we should do the complete rise and fall of the Roman Empire abridged. And now I think we could do that and just substitute American for Roman, but again, that seems sort of current events and not, and maybe that's another way to answer it. Politics feels like current events. And I'm not sure we always have the perspective on it, there are comedians who are great about that. But I'm not sure, as you say, we're writing theater that hopefully has a shelf life beyond the current moment, and I think we can make jokes about Republicans and Democrats, but I think jokes is about all you get. We did this show. It was originally called the Complete Millennium Musical Abridged, and it dated very quickly. Some aspects of it haven't dated, but the title certainly did, which is why we changed it to Western Civilization. So there are elements that actually still hold up. I had to read it recently. And then there are elements that really, really don't.
I heard, I listened to Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend. I'm not fond of him at all on TV, but I love his podcast. And he was talking to Steve Coogan, who said all of his Alan Partridge stuff, he intentionally tried to not include anything topical. He wanted it to be evergreen. And we would like our scripts to be evergreen. But this kind of leads into another conversation. How do we decide what we're going to do next? So we don't want it to be current events that will date. It needs to be something Austin and I are very interested in, would like to research, would like to write, would like to perform probably for as long as we're able. So, years and years and years. We want it to play. We want people who book us to like it. We'd like audiences to be interested in it. We want it to play internationally. So we don't want something generally too specifically American or too specifically British. So yeah, it's an interesting question.
So Austin held up the Millennium. I want to do another clip real fast. Music is a big part of your show. So let me just do a quick musical bit from your show, and let's talk about music incorporating in your show.
Take it away, you.
Fight, 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 kill, 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 fight, 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 kill, 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 fight, 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 kill, 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 or else the lives will never will say, when all our right smiles down all stairs, we understand our glory, refuse to act our age, there's nothing we love more than our special. We rather be hands are chained and small, with our might and strong.
That's good stuff. Talk about putting music in your shows.
Well, first of all, that's at the New Victory Theater in New York City, where we played 3 times, and would love to go back. Yes, and as you can tell, those are our sign interpreters.
Yeah, that was I love that. I love that song because that song was fun for me in a whole bunch of ways, because I love that sort of contrapuntal harmony where 3 melodies suddenly become one. And it was also the only time, or the first time, I was able to musicalize a thing we do in all of our scripts, which is that we argue, and then come to a joint realization of the way to do something. And this was a perfect examination of that, because before that song starts, if you hadn't seen the show, we're arguing about that, hey, we should have a fight song because every team has a fight song, every college has a fight song. And I think it should be beautiful and Shakespearean, We Band of Brothers. And Reed goes, no, it should be short and to the point. Fight, 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 kill, 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 kill. And it's Matt Rippey as the wise fool who's offers something heartfelt and beautiful and true. And then I get the idea that, oh my God, we'll do it together. And that's a great clip, Matt, because that's exactly what we do with the Reduced Shakespeare Company. We started putting music in, I guess, the America show, right? Because
the Star Spangled Banner at the top of the show, off one note, inspired by something going back to the, Daniel, Jess, Adam Founder days, where they would go to a Dodger game, I think, and sing the national anthem one note off from everybody else, and people go, "What's going on?"
And I know it was something that Adam always liked to do, put in musical bits too, and he and I share that impulse. And in fact, Adam's wife Alex was saying, "Oh my God, you guys should write a musical," and that was a little bit why we added as much music as we did into the Bible show, which was our next show, and then we wrote the Complete Millennium musical abridged, and we discovered with the Complete Millennium musical abridged that when we do songs, the less is more.
Yes, leave them wanting more, not leave them wanting less.
Yeah.
Or in the Bible show, it's just like, I think, inspired by probably a sketch in the Kentucky Fried Movie, that's Armageddon, and also Always Look on the Bright Side of Life. I was jogging in DC probably when we were first year there. I thought, oh, we should put a song at the end. Oh, that's Armageddon. That's how that comes about. Or I'd seen for the sports show, we do sports of different continents. When in Europe, you will notice that they play the strangest games. And I'd seen a thing online where these somebody had done something similar, with that song about words popping up and revealing names and stuff. And so, that's my inspiration for that.
Well, and then we were writing the comedy show, and you said, Reed, now you're writing a song for this, right? I went, what? I mean, it was like, it wasn't even a dare. It was just like, all right, and you'll write a song. And I was going, no, I don't have any ideas for a song until I did, until I was actually sorting through some pictures. And it was given to us from our producers in London during the Arts Theater, Bernard Levin, the noted critic and a TV host and whatever, had written an op-ed in the Times of London, and the headline was "Laugh question mark I nearly died," which gave me the idea for "I laughed till I cried." I laughed till I cried. I thought I would die, and that became and then that just gets into a bunch more ideas. Like I'd always wanted to write a patter song of the. Anyway, so it's just music is great, particularly for us in small doses.
Well, and it goes back to we try to write for ourselves to whatever particular weird, stupid human tricks we have.
Yeah.
So, Austin played the keyboard and he taught himself the ukulele. I played the accordion, right? So, we put that in shows sometimes.
It's also this is the thing too, that people when we are asked to every now and then, hey, can you do 20 minutes at this event or this event and this event, and it's not typically no, we can't, because our stuff is not liftable. We don't do short self-contained sketches for the most part. Every now and then we do, but if you do a song, you can. And I found that people, you're just an actor, okay, wait, you sing, you're immensely talented.
Well, and it's a variety show, right? It's vaudeville. It's new vaudeville. So in vaudeville, right, it was we've not brought animals in. Well, Matt Croke, we sort of had an animal, but music, juggling, tumbling, you try to put in as much as you can, magic.
You mentioned, go ahead, Austin.
I was just going to say that Steve Crowell said the works of Homer reduced, and we did do the works of Homer in All the Great Books Abridged, where we combined the Odyssey, the Iliad and the Odyssey into a mammoth 20-minute piece called The Idiotity. So if you're interested in the works of Homer reduced, it's right here.
It's the second half of the first act of the show. And actually, getting back to something we talked earlier at this event, I directed that and adapted it at Santa Rosa Junior College a year ago with a cast of, I think we had 12. It was a super diverse cast, and it worked great.
Reed, you mentioned Monty Python earlier, then you mentioned a little bit of vaudeville. This is a specific question, but let's go out. Bruce Barber says, I always hear reverberations of the Firesign Theater in your work. Were they a fact and influence in your rubbery young minds? Talk about the Firesign Theater and vaudeville and any other influences.
Well, certainly the Firesign Theater for me. Those are their albums I listened to, along with Bill Cosby. Oh, so sad about what he did. George Carlin, a lot of old radio dramas and comedies. The Firesign particularly, which they just they were freewheeling, and that was. And I'm a big lover of puns, and I'm a big lover of playing with the form. So we were able to kind of play with the form more of audio comedy in our radio show that we did for the BBC World Service, but just the leaps of logic. And you can do that in a comedy in a way you can't do in a serious piece. I mean, I think Spade Diamond is absolutely descended from Nick Danger, Firesign Theater's Nick Danger. So,
Well,
and now we're buddies with Phil and David Osmond, the two remaining members.
Definitely our complete world sports abridged had the Monty Python element of, because it was sort of all done as a sports cast. So the way Monty Python would just get to the last funny bit, and now for something completely different in the complete world of sports, we would just cut away and go to the next broadcast. So that's a Python influence. But yeah, I watched as a kid. I would get up in the morning, watch cartoons or whatever, right? Go to school, come home for lunch, watch Little Rascals, go home, back to school, come back, watch the Stooges. I remember my dad bringing me to Sonoma State University in the days before home video to watch Chaplin and Harold Lloyd and Keaton. And I loved the Smothers Brothers and
friend of the show, Howard Sherman is yelling, Freeberg, Lair, Alan Sherman. Howard Sherman's checking in.
I just love that. Tom Lehrer. My folks had, the Tom Lehrer album. Yeah.
Yeah, most of my songs, people will go, "Oh, that's Tom Lehrer." No, it's actually me doing Tom Lehrer badly. Yeah, absolutely.
Jen Lau says, which role within the RSC do you find the most fulfilling and the most challenging? Actor, writer, administrator. Also, how do you handle juggling all those different jobs?
The challenging is the administrator.
Yeah, it's show business. The business side, I mean, we have Jane Martin, my bride, and our general manager, and Allie Bosted, who's our company manager, do a day to day. But Austin and I are doing it day to day as well. So that's the business side, so that we can do the show. Right. I would say the most gratifying instant gratification is performing, but the more deeply satisfying is writing. It's harder. It takes longer. I find it more, it's just chipping away. It's like making a sculpture or any kind of work of art. It's painstaking. It takes a lot of thought, a lot of effort. It's constantly evolving. But then when it finally is right, it isn't fleeting. I guess a performance is fleeting on any given show. Yeah. But the script is there for as long as scripts are around.
It's I don't like writing, but I like having written.
That's it.
But because it's hard. But in terms of, everybody says, oh well, Shakespeare wrote his sonnets and King Lear during the plagues. I'm not getting much writing done because I feel like I'm doing a ton of Zoom meetings, or Zoom teaching in Reed's case. But this goes back to an earlier question too, about acting, is that about making it seem like it's just happening. For me, giving a performance night after night is an opportunity to get it right, and you can never get it right. But every night you get another shot at it, and I have no interest in painting or cooking. I have no patience for it. I'm not good at it, but I do have patience and skill in trying to write the perfect joke, create the perfect context, deliver a line in a way that feels absolutely spontaneous. And respond in the moment to something that's genuinely happening. Those skills I have, and that's fun. I have that patience.
Well, and people sometimes ask us, what's our writing process? We're members of the Dramatists Guild, and most issues they have a thing. What's your process? When do you write? And some people, I wake up at 8 and I have my tea and I go for a 15-minute walk and then I write for 4 hours and then I come home and it's just like, I write when I can. Austin and I are doing many, many things. If I had to write on a schedule like that, nothing would ever get written. And a lot I write in my head, and then come down and put it on paper.
Do you do this, Reed? Because I try to write at the last possible second. I try to have it formed in my head, so at least I have a direction, and so that's when I really like to write. I've been thinking about it. There's an obvious image that I'm not going to use here, but then I get to the computer and I get it out. But every now and then I don't know what I'm going to write, and so I won't, and I don't. So I just sit down and start writing, and then something comes. Is that what happens to you?
Yeah, I think for me it can be both ways. That I have an idea of, multiple ways. I have an idea, more or less, a scene more or less written in my head, and then just I was out swimming or whatever, and I have to type it down. Or I have a kernel for an idea and I work it out as I'm writing it, and sometimes no idea at all. But there's a deadline. A deadline is a great motivator, right? We need a scene about that. We need to connect the scene between these two. Here's what has to happen. I don't know what it is. Let me write. And even if that doesn't end up being the thing, Joel Cole, who's my journalism teacher in high school, said, write something, right? Now you're rewriting. Yeah. The empty page is the hardest thing.
I've gotten better at that recently in the last couple of years, where sometimes I'll get stuck on a sentence because it's not exactly right, and I'll just go, oh, F it, just type something. I can always go back and fix, will always go back and fix.
Now, sometimes that ends up being the thing, like Billy Wilder. I was just showing my film comedy class, Saga Hot, and he and his co-playwright, screenwriter said, well, what's the last line? I don't know. For now, let's just say nobody's perfect. We'll figure it out later. And it's like one of the great end lines of all it was just, we need something. Let's write that down. Well, that ended up being the thing.
I want to drill down into the writing, especially the way you create your shows. Because I know you're talking about when I write, but let's get a little more into it for those who are listening. I'm going to play a clip because we already talked about music, and what's fascinating about your shows are, you mentioned it's like a song. Here's a clip where in this part of the show, it's just the three of you talking verbally doing comedy. Let's listen.
The combination of two old movies.
Right. Like they combine James Bond and Home Alone and get Spy Kids. Right? Yeah.
Or they mix My Fair Lady and Clute and get Pretty Woman.
Or you mix Unforgiven with The Birdcage and get Brokeback Mountain.
So let's talk about the writing. How do you put together a show? When you say you sit down and write what comes to you, what are you looking to do? How are you breaking up a play? What is in your mind while you write?
Well, yeah. Why do I don't know. I guess I think this is true for Austin. I've heard him say it. We've been put on shows since we were kids, right? It's just somehow deep in our bones, whether when I was a kid, it was doing puppet shows for the neighborhood kids and charging a nickel, or putting on a carnival on the front lawn, or doing my accordion practice and charging the neighborhood kids to hear me practice Bureau Barrel Polka. So yeah, that's why I do it. I'm good at it. I enjoy it, and it's my job. It's not always fun, but it's way more fun than not fun. In terms of, I don't know, Austin, did you want to speak to that?
What was the question? I forgot.
Basically,
All right.
the putting together the different components of the show. Some is standing there talking, some is music, some is physical comedy. When you sit down to write, how are you looking to put together a show that you think is going to entertain people?
For me, it's always trying to find the story, and it doesn't need to be a rich or complicated story necessarily. There just needs to be a through line that an actor can play and that an audience can latch onto and engage with. So it's not just a collection of random scenes, right? So we always have something. We always have an objective and a goal to accomplish. And yes, we need to cover all the great books or whatever. But this was most complicated for me when we were writing the Complete History of Comedy Abridged, because I feel like every show we do is the Complete History of Comedy Abridged. We're bringing in every form of comedy we can think of that we've ever seen. So if the Complete History of Comedy is the subtext of all of our shows, what happens when we make it the text of the shows? And so when we were writing the Complete History of Comedy, we were already thinking about how we would write the William Shakespeare's Long Lost First Play Abridged, in that we had found the first draft of Shakespeare's long lost very first play, and it was 100 hours long, and we needed to condense it. So we'd found this thing. So we went, well, let's just steal from ourselves. And we found this ancient text, The Art of Comedy, inspired by, stolen from Sun Tzu's The Art of War. And we found it, and we needed to reduce it, but we had a reason to reduce it, because we're saving the world. But there was also a missing chapter. And what was fun for me, once I figured out that, and that we had, I think Reed said, oh, and there's a missing chapter, and where's that chapter going to come from? And then Reed tells the story, and Matt Croke tells the story of Rambozo in the circus. This comes from a circus thing, and you can talk about this in a second. And I said, well, what if we take that story and make that a character? So Rambozo, the clown, became our savior, our religious figure, our Buddha, our Jesus. Yeah. And me, who's not at all religious in any traditional sense, suddenly my character became incredibly religious, where Rambozo was my comedian angel. And so the last half of the second act was the appearance of Rambozo, who then guided us and gave us all the life lessons. And once I sort of had that figured out, then we can sort of figure out what goes where and what's a good bit that will end Act One, because you always want to end. Did you already talk about the W, Reed?
No, I had the impulse and was waiting for my moment.
Yes, take it away.
Well, one, Rambozo was something Max Daniels, who was a clown on Ringling, who was leaving as I was coming in. But yeah, he'd go out and, goof around with the crowd. And he said, Rambozo, get in, get the laugh, get out. But yeah, so when we're creating a show, we want it in the shape of a W, right? We always have an intermission. So you want it to start good. It can take a little dip in the middle. You want to finish the first act strong. You want to start the second act strong. It can go down, and then you need to finish strong. And Paul McCartney has talked about this, when you're putting a set together for the Beatles or Wings, the supergroup Wings, that you want it in a W shape. We're also thinking that, talking about the musicality in a comedy, you don't probably want two kind of slower scenes, or you don't want two quick banter scenes back to back. So like in the Complete History of Comedy, we're going chronologically pretty much. But within that, we also need to be aware, well, don't have two quick banter scenes back to back. We don't want to do two songs back to back. Sometimes it's as simple as Austin has 2 scenes back to back and he's got to make a change. We need 30 or 60 seconds. This is very vaudevillian. We're going to draw the curtain. We're going to do something in front of the curtain, open it up and go on to the next scene. So that's another consideration. It's just the 3 of us. So how are we going to make those changes?
One example of that, Matt Croke, will remember, is when we were doing, again, All the Great Books. Reed wrote this very funny sketch where it was basically a 1-sentence summary of all these different great books, like 30 or 50 of them. And we did it at our very first workshop performance in front of people, and it killed so hard. We went, well, we need to put that at the end of the show, because there's no recovering from that. There's no topping it, you know? And also I found different actors bring different qualities to that, you know? So the more, whoever plays Matt Croke's idiot savant, man-child, wise fool character, the more innocent and foolish he is, the greater the payoff there is when he does this incredible 1-sentence summary of all these books, because the audience is so rooting for him and laughing at the same time.
And another way we write is, I think, going back to that clip with Dominic and Jerry Kernian playing the director role and Austin, those combining 2 movies and getting a new movie, we spent weeks and weeks just throwing ideas at each other. Is this funny? But the audience is also part of it. We workshopped all the great books at Bang, the late great Bang improv studios in LA. And so we probably had 4, 5, 10 times as many movie combinations that we tried over the course of the rehearsal and the workshop period. And we find out what audiences think is funny, right? And so the stuff that we think is funny, but the audience doesn't, well, guess what? It kind of isn't.
Well, then Andy kind of brings that up, same thing. How many drafts between concept and final version? I don't mean minor tweaks. I'm talking major rewrites. And I know you just mentioned it, Reed, of the luxury of putting it in front of an audience to do major tweaks. But how many versions of major rewrites do you think you guys do per show?
That question was from our friend Andy Robson in Edinburgh, and I'm so sorry that we're not there, and I'm so sorry that the Fringe is canceled this summer. That's just horrible, horrible news, but I hope you're well, and we hope that everybody who's watching this is well.
And we're hoping to bring Hamlet's Big Adventure to Edinburgh as soon as we possibly can.
Yeah.
You know, we usually say 5, 6, 8 drafts. There's not a firm answer to that, because generally the way we write it is kind of scene by scene. So a wholesale rewrite from beginning to end I don't think about it in those terms. Some things are kind of done, you know, some sketches work pretty much right out of the gate. Other ones take a lot of rewriting. So, and every show is a little bit different.
Yeah.
But I don't know, Austin is 5 or 6. I don't know, what we call a draft isn't always a full new draft. And I don't know, you define a full new draft, but
no, I think what you're saying is really right. The thing that often takes the most major, in terms of major rewriting, is this structure that I was talking about earlier. Like All the Great Books was perfect, because we knew from the jump it was 3 teachers teaching a remedial English class, and the whole audience in the theater was the remedial English class, and that by the end of the graduation is in 2 hours, and so the structure was right there. We tried to use that structure in Completely Hollywood Abridged, and it absolutely didn't work. And in fact, critics have said this, and I don't disagree. The first act of Completely Hollywood Abridged is kind of a mess. It works. We kind of get away with it, but only because the second act is so great. But I think this happened in comedy a little bit. Certainly happened in Hamlet's Big Adventure. After the first couple of table reads with our workshop actors, Jessica Romero, Peter, I forgot his last name, and Chad Yarish, we realized, well, wait a second. What if our story is this instead of this? And so when you change the story that much, or you say, well, what if Rambozo shows up? That now creates a different thing, a different set of rules and requirements. And I forget who said this. I follow Christopher Moore and Lauren Gutterson on Twitter, and I bet it was one of them. They said the art of writing is making it look like you planned it that way all along. And so you do a lot of reverse engineering to, all right, well, if it's going to pay off this way at the end, then we need to set it up here and here and here prior to those moments. And then that affects where we place sketches every now and then.
And so sometimes we know, as we start writing, we think we know what the end is. That makes it easier. And that might change. And then we have to go back and change other things. But the Bible, well, I'm pretty sure we're going to be finishing with Revelation, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think our two most recent shows, it evolved a bit. The end evolved. And so then you have to go back and adjust, you know, your target has changed. Lauren Gunderson, I think, talked about this in her playwriting class. Her online playwriting class. Decide what the ending is and work towards that. And as you're working toward it, you go, you know what? I don't think that is the ending. The ending's a little bit different. So now we have to go back and change this to make sure the whole thing is headed in that direction.
Well, and this is the other thing too, is that the minute, like we get this question sometimes, you know, how much of this is autobiographical? Well, everything a writer writes is autobiographical in some way. So it's kind of a dumb question, but the piece will tell you what it needs to be. You know, once you write it down, it now exists, and now it must be served. It will tell you that, oh, this feels like we're going in this direction. We either need to let it go in this direction or write something different, because you need to, and not, which is why we write all these shows, and you would think that the experience of writing the previous ones would make the next ones easier. Oh, well, now we know how to do it, but it's not, because every piece is different. I think what the experience we've gotten over the years is that we've learned to be less precious. I certainly have, about making cuts and killing your darlings, as they say. But since every piece is different and has its own needs, then that requires that we respond as writers and even actors sometimes to what the piece needs.
Yeah, writing a particular scene, I don't think ever becomes easier. But I think we understand our process better, as you said. You know, I think both of us resist less cutting things. Or sometimes we have to shorten something. Say we go to Edinburgh, we have to do the show in 90 minutes or 60 minutes. We cut stuff. Most of it we never miss. And I think we used to resist that more. Also, when we first started to write the history of America, abridged with Adam, the three of us would sit in a room together and try to write scenes. That turned out to be a really bad idea. It was much more productive for us to, you know, because we'd argue about what's the scene going to be, as opposed to let's all go away, decide what we're going to write, bring it back together. Now we can talk about something concrete that exists and adjust it from there. So things like that.
I do want to get to some questions, but let's stay on that for 1 second, because how do you guys collaborate all these years of that? How do you know what to fight for? Can you give us any quick insights of writing as a team, which is different than writing, obviously, individually?
It's like we always say this, Reed and I are like an old married couple without the sex, except for that one time. It is, and it's kind of like the person who feels most passionate about something wins in terms of those arguments. But we've also learned not to have that many arguments anymore, because the audience will tell you if something's funny or if they're tracking an element of the story or something.
Yeah, we used to argue so much. Oh, this is hilarious. No, it isn't. I mean, not us and I are not big loud arguers. That's probably one of the secrets to, you know, we've also both been married for ever to our wives. So I don't know, we're a long-term relationship people, so we're fortunate that way. I think it sounds terrible. I think we're basically kind to each other for the most part. We certainly try to be. And Austin's right. Yeah, if somebody really wants to try something, go for it, right? And those arguments about, oh, this is going to be funny, there's absolutely no point to that, and we learned that fairly early on. What's good is we'll do these shows hundreds and hundreds of times, so during the workshop we'll know after one or two performances if something is funny. And sometimes maybe we think, oh, you know what, I think it is funny, it was that audience. And then in which case we can try a little bit longer. But yeah, whoever feels more strongly about it gets to do it. The audience can decide if it's funny. Be kind to each other.
Yeah, be kind is a great note for anybody in any in any industry. You know, sometimes we'll do something and it doesn't get the laugh, and we'll go, yeah, well, all right, that doesn't work. And sometimes we'll argue, you know what, let's try it one more time because I think we didn't do it right here, or it needs to be in a different place. And sometimes it'll work in the new place, and sometimes we'll go, no, we were right, it doesn't work.
Yeah, sometimes something is not funny because of where it's located in the show. Yeah, what happened right before?
Yeah.
I'm just popping in because Greg has a comment. I just want to remind everyone on Facebook, keep the comments coming. I know there's a lot. Reed and Austin will read them afterwards, so please keep these comments coming. Greg wants to know if you guys ever read Christopher Moore's book with the Fool as a lead character and either drawn from them or laughed. And Jeff Lanham, who's a podcast listener, says Austin talked about them in one of his podcasts. So talk about Christopher Moore.
Well, I was going to point out that my those are my bookshelves behind me. They're just in a different room than the one I'm in, and right here is my stack of Christopher Moore books, including, I can't zoom in on it, but Fool right there, the second from the top. Yeah, Christopher Moore is a great. He makes it. There's a guy who makes it look effortless. Christopher Moore. He's also very funny on Twitter if you're not following him there. I kind of stopped listening to the question after you said Christopher Moore. Are you talking about
he very graciously came to a workshop performance of William Shakespeare's long lost first play. Then we did a little, sort of a reading of it up in Calistoga, California, and gave us feedback. Super nice guy.
Super nice guy. And Fool is great. And in fact, in like 3 weeks, Chris Moore's newest book, Shakespeare for Squirrels, is coming out. And I have a podcast interview with him already in the bank. And in fact, and so I'm going to release that in 3 weeks, talking about it. I've been able to read the draft of it, and it's fantastic.
I read his book, Lamb, about Jesus's best friend, Biff, right? And I don't have this, I don't think I've ever had this experience. We were touring, and on 2 different plane flights, the person sitting next to me goes, "Oh, I read that. That's an awesome book."
Yeah, it's a great classic, modern classic. Top 5 books for me is Lamb, but there's nothing wrong with Fool and all the other ones either.
I want to go another quick clip. I think one of the most underrated things about your comedy are, again, I want to talk about the reactions and levels. This isn't even part of your show. It's a clip you did with the Folger Shakespeare Library, and the third person is not even an RSC member. But watch this clip and just talk about playing comedy with reactions and status. Here we go.
Well, first of all, the paper isn't right. It's not handmade rag paper, which is what it would have to be if it were from the 16th century.
But that's not our fault.
Yeah, no. I think if you go to the back, it says property of Ye Olde Office Depot.
The handwriting isn't right either.
What's the matter with it?
It's not in secretary hand, which is the hand that Shakespeare would have used.
He wrote it himself. He didn't use a secretary. Yeah. This is what we're telling you.
No, so I mean the style of handwriting in the period is called secretary hand. It's not about whether or not Shakespeare had a secretary.
Okay, so you're a scholar. What would you call it?
I would call it a forgery.
You also
Reed, I know you have clowning back. Both your expressions are priceless in that. Talk about reactions again. I know we talked about it a little bit, but how important is that in not only status, but getting laughter?
Well, it's like listening, right? It's the secret to actor, right? Ben Kingsley says, "I'm not an actor, I'm a reactor," right? The best actors are listeners. So yeah, we didn't exactly, we went through it a few times as I recall. So we had an idea what she was going to say, but yeah, here's a weird concept: listen and react honestly.
We absolutely improvised that the first time we shot it. That is Heather Wolf, who is the head of manuscripts at the Folger Shakespeare Library in Washington, D.C. And they wanted to put, Google her, because she's a real scholar and has made some significant Shakespeare discoveries in the last couple of years. Article with her in the New York Times recently. But the Folger wanted to make a promo video for us premiering Long Lost Shakes there, and we just said, we would just like it. We just think it would be hysterical if you guys took it seriously as we are pretending to take it. And so they honored the truth of the joke, right? They played along, and Heather said, "Well, I'm not an actor." When we said, just treat us the way you would treat any numbnut who walks in here with a clearly forged manuscript. And she's trying so hard to be polite.
Well, if 2 morons walked in and said, "Hey, we've discovered a Shakespeare play. How would you respond?" And she responded the way, truthfully, right? Tell the truth.
And later in that clip, security does throw us out, which is fun. But also later in that clip, Michael Whitmore, the director of the Shakespeare Library, engages with us in a bit as well. It's one of the things I love most about the Folger is that they believe they're absolutely not stuffy for the most part. But they absolutely believe that any engagement you have with Shakespeare is the right engagement, the right kind of engagement. So that was really funny, but it's also, I don't know, Matt, are we even answering your question? It's a funny bit, but we're just honoring the truth of the situation. You know, we've written his long lost first play, so that tells you, well, then we better take it seriously. And even the Folger knows, well, we better honor the concept. But talking about
what's the game, right? Like improv. What's the game? Play the game.
Yeah, and it answers the question also because, and I wanted to just touch a little bit more because both of you said, what is the honest reaction of bringing it in here? But even looking at, and again, if you can watch it again, find it online, you know, Reed is just devastated that this could even be in question. And I think sometimes that's missed of not only the listening, the reacting and actually playing the realness of the script of that's where it comes from. It's not just the words, it's what is the reaction of how you feel.
Yeah, and it's interesting, like when we write a scene, and sometimes three of us are on stage, but only two of us are talking, right? And when we first start to read it, I go, I don't have anything to do in this scene. And I can tell you honestly, by the time the show opens, I feel 100% I'm in this scene. I have an opinion about everything that's being said. I have a bunch of things I don't get to say because they're talking, right? So, I mean, our joke is blah, 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 my line. But but I can honestly say in the scenes where I'm on stage, I'm fully acting and engaged and listening and thinking things. I just happen to not have any lines at that particular point.
Yes, agreed. I mean, yeah, just
Austin was going blah, 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 my line. Yeah.
Oh, is it my turn to talk? Yeah, no, it's just, you know, playing the stakes, playing it for real. And I see this with other productions of not only our plays, but other plays and Shakespeare plays. You know, they think, oh, because Shakespeare wrote Twelfth Night or Much Ado About Nothing, all you need to do is say the lines. No, you don't. And the comedy just goes, you can hear the audience not laughing at moments where they should be laughing because they don't get it. They're not engaged. You know, it's the kind of Shakespeare I hate because it just turns people off to Shakespeare. I
want to do a quick anecdote. You said blah, 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 my line. We were writing, they were writing a new show. We were actually performing a show. And Austin was in his head writing a new show during the performance. And we were performing and it's his line. And he's just looking up and he looks over. He's like, oh, I'm sorry. Is that my line? And then cop to the audience of, I'm sorry, I'm working on that new scene.
Well, the other thing that happens is like, there's bits that we cut out of the America show probably a month in after the premiere of it, right? Or 6 months. And this show premiered in 1993. So that's how old the show is. And every once in a while on an 8-show week, you know, on a 4-show weekend, like the third show, a line comes back that we haven't said for 10 years. And right, that just somehow it's somewhere deep lodged in my head and it comes out. I go, oh yeah, that's the thing we cut recently. Yeah, 20 years. You know?
Yeah, it's still in our muscles. Yeah.
Austin, you're going to do the Shakespeare book. Why don't you go ahead? You're about to pull that up, the pop-up book.
Well, I was just going to say, talking about engagement with Shakespeare on any level. You know, Reed and I wrote Pop-Up Shakespeare because this gal right here, Jenny Maisels, is the doyenne. Is that the right words? The Dowager Countess of Pop-Up.
I think that's technically the name. Yeah.
Yes, there it is. She's done Pop-Up New York, Pop-Up London, Pop-Up The Body, which feels like it's a book illustrated by Georgia O'Keeffe in places. But she reached out to us on Twitter and said, do you have an email? I have an idea. I promise I'm not mad, or I forget the word she used. Anyway. But anyway, she then sent us an email saying, I want to do a Pop-Up Shakespeare book and you guys are the guys to write it. And we went, yeah, we're not idiots. Sure, of course we'll do it. And, you know, in 10 minutes, we had a book, the idea for the book. And it's been delightful it was delightful to write it. And I don't know, because of my background, you might not be able to see it, but anyway, it's every single play and it's got facts about all of them. And I pull it off the shelf every now and then to go, wait, which one is Measure for Measure? Is that the problematic one for what? I forget. You know, it's a lovely introduction. And I'm not just saying that. I paid other good people to say that too.
I think she said, I'm not crazy or I'm not insane. And we found out that she absolutely is in the very best possible way, just like ourselves.
Yes, exactly.
Ryan Patrick says, hey, Austin and Reed, so good to see you guys. A few weeks ago, I had to break the news to 40 high schoolers that their spring musical production, The Addams Family, was canceled. It was a tough but necessary decision, but didn't make it any easier. What words of wisdom can you share with young students around the country who've had their theatrical productions shuttered due to the current health crisis?
Well, I was directing the Addams Family musical at Napa Valley College, and they canceled it literally opening night. So we got through the whole rehearsal period, final dress. We did a preview for a few students, and it ended. This too shall pass.
Yeah.
But there's no doubt it's just disappointing. And some of those who are seniors, the juniors, maybe they'll come back to it when things reopen, and if the costumes and set are built, you can remount it. There's no doubt it's disappointing.
Howard Sherman several weeks ago suggested that we ask students, high school students, to make it a contest to create their own 1-minute reductions on things, because they're not getting to do their shows. And I just never wrapped my brain around. I think it's a great idea, and I've just never wrapped my brain around the administration of it. And I also don't want it to feel like homework. For me, I've been invited to do a bunch of readings, and just online readings, and I've declined them because it feels like people just getting together and reading because they have to, and that's great. I don't have to. I will get my chance to act again, and I'm certainly writing, and I'm certainly enjoying other people's productions, and I'm certainly enjoying all these sorts of Zoom happy hours and meetups and Q&As and stuff. So I would never want to, hey, I've got a great idea, you make something. That feels weird to me. But if somebody wanted to, if there were students out there who want to do the complete abridged whatever, complete abridged Kanye, I'm picking a name out of that's dating me probably, the complete abridged Moby Dick, like a 1-minute abridgment of something. If you guys wanted to do that, we would absolutely judge that and judge it, approve, celebrate it, and the one that gets the most likes gets a signed pop-up book.
Yeah, I actually think that's a great idea. We could talk about it later, of actually submitting it.
Talk about, Addams Family got canceled on opening night. I'm also directing at San Joaquin Delta College in Stockton. We're updating and expanding the cast for Completely Hollywood Abridged, which was supposed to be 2 live performances in the Studio Theater there in Stockton, California. And we're adapting it to perform it on Zoom. So this show's 15 years old, so it's great to update the references. It's fun to expand it, with a cast of all kinds of folks. And it's not the same, right? I mean, some people said, oh, theater, electronically is not the same. Really? Wow, that's no, it's not, right? But my experience is, I think the actors in the show are having fun. I'm learning a lot about updating it, what flies 15 years later and what doesn't, and what jokes do they get and what don't they get, and what can you do on Zoom and what can't you do on Zoom. So, you make do.
Yeah, we're all learning. We're all learning about what this particular moment is and what the moment is going forward.
Well, let's talk about your long career, because it's impressive. And I know, even talking to a lot of young students or people who are trying to get in the career, talk about staying in the game. You've been through many things, 9/11, where people stopped going to the theater, economic depressions, how do you, even now, how do you continue to write or keep going to keep a career in the arts? How many avenues do you have to keep pursuing to stay active?
Well, you have to be able to do a lot of things. I know very few people who do one thing in show business and make a living at it, right? And we've been talking about it from the beginning of this event, right? Austin and I are producers, we're playwrights, we're actors, we're directors, we're educators. So, we wear lots of different hats. I think we also, you hear athletes say about this, you try not to get too high, you try not to get too low, right? There are going to be difficult times, prepare for that and keep going. I mean, a lot of people just fall by the wayside because they, life happens. I mean, we've been fortunate too, that during the tough times, somehow we scraped through and kept going. I will say one way that the RSC keeps going during these difficult times, because our March, April, May, June shows have all been mostly rescheduled, but pretty far out, a couple canceled, some still up in the air. We don't own a theater, right? So we don't have that overhead. We have a very small staff. The administration work that Austin and I do, we don't pay ourselves for that. We pay ourselves for the artistic stuff. So wear many hats. Don't get too high, too low. Keep your expenses as low as possible. I don't know, Austin, what else is there?
Well, yeah, I mean, everything that you said. I mean, if there's something else, I mean, we say this all the time, engineering is a great career. Whoever runs Netflix is doing a great job, particularly now. But that's assume that this is what you do. And if this is what you do, then you figure out ways to do it. I mean, the thing that we have been the smartest about, or the luckiest about, is that we run a theater company that produces only our scripts and hires you and me to act, and as many of our friends and new actors as we can hire. So, I mean, that's one thing too, is, come up with a genius idea. I wish I'd thought of Blue Man Group, because they travel even better than we do, because they are not restricted to language. It wouldn't be my thing, and there's no way I would have done that. But that's one way of how they're different from us.
I do want. I know we're. Go ahead, Reed. No, please.
I was going to say, also, how do we react when things get tough? I don't know, Austin, your gut level reaction. When something goes bad, or you get a bad review or something, it just makes me mad. I guess I find it motivating. Not always. It's disappointing, but then sometimes I just get mad right away, or I'm disappointed. It's like, oh, I think you're wrong, right? I'm just determination. Yeah, hard work. I don't know anybody. I know a lot of people who aren't very talented. I mean, who succeed. I think if I was going to say what's one thing that determines success, hard work.
Yeah. And again, not being an eggplant emoji. And also, I think you said this, don't get too high, too low, is, if we get criticism, don't overreact to it. And if we get praise, don't overreact to that. Don't believe your own press. You're not special because you're more famous or you're making more money. We're all doing this. We're all trying to figure out how to do this. And I always say that what we do isn't brain surgery, because brain surgery is easy. You can learn to do brain surgery. What we do is trial and error and really complicated. And there's no one right way to do it. So, I mean, I guess that's the encouragement I would give, is there's whatever way you're doing it is the right way.
I know we're coming up at an hour and a half. I do want to get to, we talked about some music in the show, talked about just some standing there and doing comedy. I want to talk about the clowning aspect, literally, for Reed, who's a Ringling clown. So take a look at this clip, and then let's talk about the clowning aspect and how you incorporate that into shows. Let's take a look.
Hi, I'm Austin. And we are the Reduced Shakespeare Company.
And one of the things we cover here in the Complete History of Comedy Abridged is comic vocabulary. The take, the slow burn, the double take, the gookie, the double take slow burn, with a Jack Benny, the trip, the rule of threes. The face slap. Oh, the backhand. The straight punch. The rolling punch. Oh, with a cross. Oh, and here comes the hair pull. Okay, stop.
I laughed till I cried. I thought I would die.
All right, let's talk about the clowning influences on your shows.
That's my favorite bit to do, because I just stand there and say things.
That's nice. Perfect.
I'm going to get a plug while Reed talks.
There you go. Matt Croke, I was a circus clown. So were you. That's where Matt Croke and I met in 1989 on the Ringling Red Show. So a physical comedy. I mean, this gets back to the thing people ask, well, why why do our shows play all over the world to a variety of kinds of audiences? Well, physical comedy transcends language. So we look, you know, in when you're clowning on the circus, say you're playing Madison Square Garden or the New Orleans Superdome, on the circus, the clowns are not mic'd. You have to tell your story physically. And so clowns, yeah, use physical language to tell the story. My movement teacher in graduate school, Steve Pearson, said, you know, if you went to see a movie or a play in a foreign language and didn't understand it, if you're doing it right, even if you don't understand what they're saying, you should be able to generally follow what's going on, right? So being able to tell the story physically is something I learned at clown college and the circus, and we try to bring to the show.
And we talked about other influences. Can you quickly name some physical comedy influences in your life, Reed?
Yeah, well, all the silent film comedians, the great ones, Keaton, Chaplin, Harold Lloyd, you get to Laurel and Hardy and, the Marx Brothers. That tripping bit is a bit that Bill Irwin used to teach us the rule of threes in a workshop he led when I was in graduate school at UC San Diego, and is actually in his the play that won him the MacArthur Genius Grant, Regard of Flight, where he trips, he steps over, and he trips again. But the great Ringling clowns, from Otto Griebling to Lou Jacobs, George Carl, not the basketball coach, but the silent comedian who played in Paris for years and years, came and performed at our clown college and did, I think, 45 minutes with a coat, a hat, and a microphone stand. It was just genius. So, and the other physical comedians, you don't think of it, but Looney Tunes. Chuck Jones didn't teach the year I was at clown college. But if you think about those classic Looney Tunes, the clowns would love to be living cartoons. And so we would study those classic Looney Tunes to see what were they doing physically that we would be capable of doing in real life.
All right, you guys have time for a couple? I know it's an hour and a half. You have time for a couple more questions?
I feel bad we haven't got to more of them. Yes.
Yes, Laura Catano says, how can I get involved doing your show? I have a comedian troupe who would love to do this kind of thing.
All the scripts are available through licensing from Broadway Play Publishing. Also, some of them are available through Joseph Weinberger in the UK. So you can license these scripts and put them on yourselves.
And you can go to our website, reducedshakespeare.com, and click on I think it's contact information, and there are links to where you can find permission and stuff to do those. I'll answer this one question. Howard Sherman says, surely you could do the complete works of the Reduced Shakespeare Company abridged. We did do that. We did an extravaganza at Reston, our home away. Extravaganza. The complete works of the we did 8 of our then 10 shows over a 2-week period, and it was brain frying. Anyway, go ahead, Matt Croke.
It was great. We have thought about putting together, sort of a greatest hits show, but I think at the moment we've got full new shows that we're interested in. But I think at some point that seems like a fun idea.
Mary Bowers wants to know, what is your most satisfying or memorable theatrical moment or moments?
I have one off the top of my head. It's the moment in the Christmas show in Lowell that time, Reed, where we do the 12 Days of Christmas, but we ask the audience members what they would really want, because no one wants Lords of Leaping or Maids of Milking anymore. And so I go out into the audience and I put people on the spot, and I got to the last day, the 12th day, and a woman said, what do you want? 12 years free of cancer, she said. And the whole audience goes, whoa. And then they started applauding, and I went, really? She said, yes, I just found out today. And she was a year free of cancer. And we all got verklempt. Genuinely, it was like, oh my God. And they gave her champagne at the intermission. It was this great moment of theater where we were absolutely all of us sharing this great real moment. It was beautiful.
Yeah, that's one of mine. The one I spoke of earlier, performing after 9/11. When some of our comic heroes have come to see the show. Eric Idle saw the show not too long ago in Pasadena. John Cleese saw it in London back in the day, or performing on stages, old vaudeville houses in the US or old theaters in Britain where maybe Chaplin performed, or Laurel and Hardy, or, those kind of places. And I'd have to say, we were fortunately performed at the White House on the 4th of July one time when we were at the Kennedy Center, and we brought our parents out, and it was really cool to share that with our families.
Phil Proctor was another one from the Firesign Theater, sent a note backstage afterwards saying, I want to meet you. And I went, and he said, I feel like you guys are carrying on the Firesign tradition. And I went, my mind was blown, because it was like, this was a comic hero saying I was doing his work. It was beautiful.
Nicole Dixon says, I feel there's a Terry Pratchett influence with the footnotes in CWSA. Is there?
In what?
In complete, well, it's CWSA, so I don't know if that's Shakespeare or sports. Terry Pratchett.
Complete works of William Shakespeare abridged, probably the applause version. Jess wrote all of those.
Yeah.
So I don't know the answer to that, but it would not surprise me.
Wouldn't surprise me either.
Rona Hatful says, what companies do you think have been most clearly influenced by your approach to comedy and abridgment?
Well, we were inspired, and we have been an inspiration. We know the 39 Steps was inspired. We know around the World in 80 Days was inspired. We know Potted Potter was inspired, but we aren't the first people to reduce something. So
The Complete Deaths abridged seems very inspired. I think that's for other people to write and decide about, including Ronan Hatfield, who wrote his dissertation in part about who has been inspired by us. We're not here to do your homework for you anymore, Ronan.
Yes, he wrote his PhD thesis about Reduced Shakespeare Company. How did that get approved? Come on.
And now he's a doctor.
Yeah.
Zach Moore from Pittsburgh is checking in, says, hey guys, and that reminds me when I think of Pittsburgh, just because of so many rich local references, talk about how you guys are able to incorporate local references when you go into a show.
Yeah, that's true. And like when we say update scripts, but Pittsburgh, Yins, you always have to say Yins, and you got to talk about the Permane brothers, right? We often, on one-nighters, we often say we're as funny as the local crew, because we come and say, okay, who's the local corrupt politician? What's the public works project that's been going on forever? What's the local slang? What's the local town nearby that people make fun of? Austin, you were going to say.
No, it was just, we're only as funny as our crew. We asked that. And I also just noticed that this may be a typo, maybe not, but Amanda Steves has said, Reed hasn't aged one butt. Might be a typo, might not.
Well, yeah. It's the drugs.
Nat Nish wants to know, have you ever considered creating a TV show of various sketch, history, true crimes, abridged?
We'd love to do a TV show. We should plug this too. Since we're not out performing, we have on our website the Remote Shakespeare Company link where you can see. So we were twice at our own video category on Jeopardy. We reduced Wagner's 17-hour ring cycle to a brief and palatable 22 minutes for Channel 4 in Britain. And also we reduced the TV show Lost. And so there's links to those video performances on our website. Where is on the website? Is it easy to find, Austin?
It's right on the homepage. Go to reducedshakespeare.com, and I've pinned it to the top of our homepage. And also Matt Croke has put up some very inspiring quarantine clown classes, although I don't know what he's calling them yet. Right, Matt? They're great. They're all less than a minute, and they're great encapsulations of how to do certain physical bits.
Yeah, so we would love to do a TV show. We came close with TBS. We did a pilot called The Week Reduced. And it looked like it was going to go, and then just at the last minute it didn't go. But anybody's interested in putting us on TV, we are interested.
And just quickly, here is that if anyone's looking for that, here is where all the Remote Shakespeare stuff is on their page, all the videos. How are you what are you both doing during the quarantine to keep yourselves busy?
Trying to avoid Zoom meetings. I'm
failing. Good luck.
I failed.
Yeah, I'm teaching 5 classes this term, so I am literally teaching 22 hours a week on Zoom. So when people say, "Hey, let's together on Zoom," I go, "I need a break from Zoom."
I just last Saturday, I got briefly onto Skype, and I felt like I was cheating on my wife. very bold and ribald. Oh, that's one thing we did. But the reason I was on Skype was that we were with Mia Gosling, who is goodticklebrain.com, who is somebody you should absolutely be following on the Twitter or go to her website. She is the world's leading and possibly only stick figure Shakespearean comic artist. Her comics are great. And Kate Pitt, who is a dramaturg of our acquaintance. We met at the Folger. She served as dramaturg for Hamlet's Big Adventure. There's Good Tickle Brain. So Kate and Mia and Dee and myself have been live tweeting Shakespeare movies, Shakespeare-related movies. And that last weekend was Shakespeare in Love, and that was a rare movie in that it was a good movie. And most of those we've been kind of giving the Mystery Science Theater treatment to Anonymous.
Did you freeze?
Which is ridiculous. Google it. Oh, did I freeze? Anyway, Anonymous. Anyway, that's been some snarky fun to do that. So it's funny. I much prefer Twitter for the quality of my interactions, and I've literally got work, and I can prove that the RSC has gotten work from Twitter. But we definitely reach more people via Facebook. I'm on Twitter a lot more if anybody wants to reach out to me.
Yeah, and I'm more on the Facebook.
And I know you're plugging a lot of your stuff. Someone asked about the DVDs. Where can you purchase most of the RSC merchandise, since we're plugging?
Well, yeah, I think all the books are available on Amazon, US and UK. The Shakespeare DVD was made by Acorn and is available on Amazon. Matt Croke, you might know better than me. Is the America DVD available anywhere?
I don't know retail where it would be available. I'd have to check on Amazon. I'm not completely sure.
It's available on YouTube in bits, and those are the two stage shows, yes, that were fully shot on DVD, and they've made so much money that we haven't done a third yet.
This is one of my favorite coffee mugs. It's absolutely one I made on Zazzle, and we can absolutely make them available for purchase if anybody wanted to buy them. The problem, and as Mia will tell you at Good Tickle Brain, the problem is maintaining an inventory. It's expensive, and so because we would love to sell jackets. I made lunchboxes. Yeah, for me and Reed. Those are fun. Merchandise, I don't know. This book, hang on, The Greatest Story Ever Sold.
Yes.
The Greatest Story Ever Sold is now called How the Bible Changed Our Lives, parentheses, mostly for the better. And it's an ebook that you can get for, I think it's like $3, £3, wherever you buy ebooks. That's
easily worth $2.
Easily, yeah. Easily worth $2. And this is a surprisingly fun, quick read that is a little political, but holds up.
Yeah, no, that's a really fun book. The other one is Reduced Shakespeare, the Complete Guide for the Attention Impaired, which I think is also available on Amazon. And that's got everything Shakespeare. We go into all the plays. Austin submersed himself in all the Shakespeare movies and reviewed all that. We talk about Shakespeare's life, and that's a really fun, that's a great bathroom book in the best sense. You can just pick it up and just read it for as long as you care to.
And it's a little more grown up than the pop-up book, but so it's more appropriate for, it's less appropriate for kids. They're both appropriate for everybody, but.
Yeah, usually we write what's funny to us as grown-ups, and kids often enjoy it, but maybe some of it goes over their head. The fun thing about the pop-up books is it was targeted for kids. It was kind of the opposite, right? It's definitely geared towards kids. Some things we had to leave it out, but it is still very fun for grown-ups.
There's a lot of comments, but for the most part, got to most of the questions. Anything you guys want to cover? Any quick road stories, any anecdotes that you want to leave us with?
I will say something that I said on Facebook, I think yesterday or somebody was asking, when are you going to do more audio comedy? And we put out a podcast every Monday and have done for 694 weeks, which is 13 years plus. Every week, every Monday, I post the Reduced Shakespeare Company podcast, and it's usually, it started out as excerpts from shows back in the day, and we'll still do bits every now and then. But a lot of time, it's more conversations like these about how we do what we do, what we're inspired by. One of the things we do that I always love is reviewing the reviews. is Reed and I will get together and read some of the both positive and negative reviews we get on the opening weekends of our shows. And that's always cathartic in a good way. But also I do a ton of interviews with the famous and infamous but knowledgeable creative people that we meet all over the world. And that's been really fun. And the last 3 or 4 weeks have been all about people, how they've been dealing with not only the plague now, but I talked to a Shakespeare scholar about how they dealt with the plague 400 years ago. Monday's episode, it drops on Monday, is a very fun conversation between 2 actors. They're married. They live here in Chicago. He is introducing her to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, movie by movie in release order. She is introducing him to the movie musicals that she loves, and she's finding the perfect one to pair with each Marvel superhero movie. And that's going to be very, very inspirational, I think, for many of us.
Well, and some of the people folks haven't heard of so much, some of them they've heard of a lot. I mean, Brian Dennehy, who passed away, you had done a podcast with him and you shared a link with that. That was several years ago. You spoke to him.
Yeah, it was 8 years ago. I was surprised to discover 2012. He did a podcast here. Yeah, it ranges from, yes, we've talked to Brian Dennehy on the one cultural hand and Weird Al Yankovic on the other cultural hand. And, a lot of our friends, David Koechner, the comedian from Anchorman. I'm still trying to get Rachel Dratch to do one. It just hasn't worked out. Sir Stanley Wells, the greatest living Shakespearean, and so far the only knight of the realm that I've interviewed, the only starship captain I've interviewed is Scott Bakula, so I have some work to do there. It runs the gamut.
Logistically, for those who want to get into podcasts as another form to express their arts, I hear this a lot about podcasting. People want to know, how long does it take? What's a commitment? How long editing, recording? What do you think about a week it takes you to get out?
It probably takes me anywhere between 3 hours to 6, 9, or 12 hours, depending on how many clips I'm splicing in and out. And
does that include the interview, or is the interview on top of that?
No, I'm not. This is on top of the interview. The interviews, I love doing the interviews because it used to be an excuse to get out of the house. And that's great for a guy who's spending a lot of his time writing. But I also, the interviews are done very portably, because if I had to be in a studio, if I had to be in front of my desk at a microphone, it wouldn't happen. Matt, you told me this when we were first starting the podcast. The key to doing a podcast is regularity. Mm-hmm. I guess that's the key for most things. But don't start something you can't continue. So I thought, well, all right, once a week I can do, and 20 minutes is a good length. I love a 20-minute podcast. I'm not crazy about these hour-long, 90-minute podcasts. We're coming up on 2 hours. We've been talking here, and I hope it's been interesting for at least a tenth of that time. But they needn't be, that's the great thing about podcasts, that they needn't be that splashy or that long. They can just be, I've also discovered that it's better to be about one thing, and just make it one thing. Get in, get out at 20 minutes.
Well, and you're saying something, I think, going back to how we've been in the business so long, keep it simple, right?
Yeah.
You decided at the beginning, we're not going to be able to write 20 minutes of material every week. So that's not what this podcast is going to be. You don't have fancy equipment. You're still using your old iPod and an old mic, and the quality is great. It's just like, and that's running our business. Try to keep it simple. But if you want to keep in contact with us, the weekly podcast, follow us on Twitter or Facebook. You can sign up for
Instagram.
Instagram. You can sign up for the Reduced Reader, which is our e-newsletter, which comes out, 4 or 6 times a year. We're planning to go out in the fall still, fingers crossed, with our election edition of the Complete History of America Abridged. All those dates aren't up online yet, but they will be as soon as the venues announce.
And you can find links to all of that at our website, reducedshakespeare.com.
That's great. Let's leave with a tip, because you do have a lot of people who watch you, who perform your shows. And like I said, and some of this may be redundant, but let's give either your top 1 or 2, someone's about to perform one of your shows or a show like it. What would be your number 1 or 2 tips about performing one of your shows or a type of show like yours?
Well, I'll just say that when you're doing a drama, you have to play it seriously. when you're doing a comedy, you have to play it even more seriously.
Yeah. Don't try to be goofy. Be aware of your objective and your obstacle and your urgency. I hear the performances. Oh, I saw the complete works. The local theater did it. It was 2 hours and 40 minutes. I said, how does it go 2 hours? And you're missing. It has to be urgent, right?
Yeah.
You have a time limit. So it needs to go fast. You need to play it seriously. Yeah. Don't gild the lily. Don't add in a bunch of jokes that are not in the script. You can update references, but don't add in jokes.
There are very few plays that deserve to be longer than 2 hours. Very, very few, and certainly not ours.
As Rambozo said, get in, get the laugh, get out.
And on that, thank you guys for taking the Q&A. For those of you watching, even if this is recorded, please continue to leave comments. We do love feedback and like to read any comments. A lot of people loving the 1 minute idea, so we'll have to see what that's about. Thank you, Reed, and thank you, Austin.
Thank you, Matt Croke, for hosting this so beautifully, and thanks for everybody for checking in. Please stay home, stay, and learn to talk.
I'm definitely that.